Evening. Welcome to the QCIS channel. On this channel, you get a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. My name is Leon Jones, and this evening, I'm going to get into a good topic, particularly if you are in the ecology or you are an arborist. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is dendrology. That's right, dendrology. Now, being an engineer, I would be asked this question, well, why would you want to deal with dendrology? Very simple. You're dealing with a lot of woody materials, which are basically trees and shrubs. In fact, there are some courses that are offered as dendrology. Well, what dendrology is basically you're studying woody materials, shrubs, trees, and you're going to be identifying them. And you're going to identify them by the tree or by the leaf. Now, there are many guides out there to help you identify trees by their leaves. Now, let me get into my PowerPoint, and I'm going to make this very, very, very easy. So, again, when I talk about dendrology, it's basically the study of the characteristics of trees, shrubs, lianas, and other woody plants. Dendrology is generally considered to be a branch of systematic botany or forestry, and it is primarily concerned with the taxonomy, that's taxonomy of woody species. Historically, dendrology also encompassed the natural history of the woody species in a given area, but such studies are now more properly ascribed to the field of ecology. Now, what do I mean by ecology? Ecology actually comes from biology. You're studying plants. That's what ecology does. Now, modern dendrology is often focused on the identification of economically useful woody plants in their taxonomic relationships for industrial forestry endeavors through the discipline, and it's always useful for the conservation of rare or endangered species. Now, that being said, I'm getting into the realm of survey. Well, when I'm doing a topo, what I'm doing is I'm identifying points. And when it comes to trees, I'm going to identify trees that may be coming down, used for wood. And that's basically because in that forest area, there's going to be development taking place. Now, when you deal with trees as far as surveying, you ID them, put them in a data collector. And the ones that are going to remain, you basically mark them with tape. Now, what you have to do is you have to basically get the radius of the tree. It could be 12 inches, it could be 24 inches, 18 inches. It could be a birch, it could be a maple, it could be a sagamore, it could be a sycamore, it could be a birch, it could be a dogwood. You have a lot of species of trees. Now, there are some trees that are endangered. Now, again, you need the trees in the forest because trees actually produce the oxygen for us. Now, I'm going to make it even easier by getting into my PowerPoint once again. And what I'm going to talk about is tree identification. So, forested. The definition of forested is land that is forested or has trees growing on it to be classified as forested or forest land. The area must be at least 1 acre and contain at least 10% of tree cover. Now, again, dendrology. Dendro comes from the word meaning tree. Ology meaning the study of. So, dendrology is the study of trees and includes taxonomy, identification, silvical characteristics, ranges, morphology, and ecology. So you're actually dealing with a science. Now, what makes a tree a tree? Now, right now, you see a common oak tree. Now, what is a characteristic about an oak tree? The nuts. Well, and basically, their heights of at least 15 feet. Single dominant woody stem or trunk or bole, capable of diameter growth. Again, capable of diameter growth. Perennial plant, present at all seasons of the year. What makes a shrub a shrub? Generally have heights under 15 feet, multi-stem, capable of diameter growth. And it is also a perennial plant. Now, I've given you information on tree identification and dendrology on how you observe a tree as a tree. But what if a leaf falls? Particularly here in the season of fall. How could you identify what type of tree that leaf fell from by the leaf? Well, if you look at this picture right here, you have different types of leaves. Now, you see these pointed leaves. Now, I don't know everything about trees, but I can tell you those pointed leaves right there, that tip, that's an oak tree. Definitely an oak tree. I know what an American elf looks like. It's generally a tree. You can see the veins. They're about 45 degrees, and I'm going to say it's an elliptical shape. Now, basically, these leaves right here, very easy. This is a maple tree. This is another oak tree. This could be a fir. Might be confused with a pine, but it's not a pine. Pines have noodles. Now, this is a pine tree right here. But again, this looks like a fir. This also looks like a fir. What, a Douglas fir? But this is how you identify trees by leaves. Some of them you can identify with the naked eye. Some of them you need to take a guide to identify the trees. Now, again, this is a science, and not everybody knows how to identify trees. Now, you have your conifers versus your decaduous. Decaduous. That's conifers versus, is it decaduous, or I'm going to say deciduous. And which is which? Well, I can tell you right now, these are these right here, they're oaks. Definitely oaks. No, actually they're maples, not oaks. They're maples. Usually a maple tree has the point, and it's basically 3-pointed leaves at the top, and then you have some other points. It's a maple tree. Now, the characteristics of conifers. Now, this is where you're going to get the idea if this tree is a pine tree. It's a good idea. Now, how do you know if it's a pine tree or or a fir tree? Well, you think about this. The characteristics of a conifer tree is definitely in the area of a pine or a spruce. Now, why do I say that? Generally, your pine trees and your spruce trees and your fir trees, they generally have one thing in common: the needle shaped leaves. That's right, they're leaves. The needles are considered leaves. Then the seeds develop inside the cones. And something else that is different when it comes to hemlocks and firs and pine trees and spruces, I'll tell you right now. You look at the seasons, and a common thing about a conifer tree is they don't change color. They're evergreen year round. Now, your oak trees and your maple trees, they all change color. The conifers don't. They're all evergreens. And then you have your gymnosperm conifer, softwood, examples, pine, spruce, hemlock, and of course, fir. Examples of conifers. And these are very common if you are going to buy Christmas trees and you get a real tree. You have a Douglas fir, Scotch pine, your red pine, your white pine, your Fraser fir, and your balsam fir. And you look at all of these, they look just like needles, all of them. And they're all similar looking. Some have cones and some may not have cones. But if you look at the color, they're all evergreens. Again, you have basically, and I want to bring that into the mix too. Basically, your firs, they have scale-like leaves, but your pine trees have needle-like leaves. That's the difference. So when you look at a tree, you see a needle on the ground, definitely a pine tree. But nevertheless, something else you have to look at when it comes to these firs. Some of them have little nuts on them as well. Now, the conifer needles come in clusters or singles. Now you have your, I'm just going to say, deciduous examples. They're also quite common, like your honey locust, your elm, your red oak, your black locust, your beech, your crimson king, and the ones that you see with the leaves turning, your red maple trees, all common. Now, the characteristics of deciduous trees, the leaf arrangement. Check the leaf arrangement out. Generally, it's whorl, WHORL, alternate. So in other words, if you look at the leaves of the trees, they look like they're at the same angle, which they are at the same angle. However, if you pull one of the branches off of a deciduous tree, that's a deciduous tree, you're going to find a pattern. You can almost make a V out of it because each leaf is at the same angle. However, when you look at that angle, you can almost fold the tree leaves on top of each other and they would mirror each other. That's the difference. And then the type is also simple or compound. The leaf edges are generally smooth, lobed, toothed, or serrated. The texture is hairy, waxy, rough, smooth, thin, and you have various leaf shapes. The leaf arrangement, like I said, you have your world. You also have your opposite. And then you have your alternate. Leaf type, simple versus compound. Simple, only one leaf blade, joined by its stalk to the woody stem. Examples, again, maple, oak, aspen, and beech. And then you have your compound. They're made up of several leaflets. Leaflets are joined to a midrib that is not woody. Examples are ash, walnut, and sumac. Now, sumac is poison. Simple or compound. I can tell you right now, this is a compound tree. Compound. Look at the leaves. They're joined by a non-wood branch. What is the leaf type? It's a simple leaf type. You have lobed, and generally your lobed leaves, they're your oak trees. Then you have your smooth and toothed. Then you look at your leaf texture, your American elm loaf. This right here is compound. They're opposite. Leaf shapes. Leaves have different shapes. More characteristics to ID trees. Bark, flowers, cones, overall shape, fruits and seeds. Again, bark, twigs, flowers, roots and seeds, cones, and overall shape. Like you have the European olive tree. And it's very important because we need some of these trees to live as well. That's why you can't destroy all the trees. That's why when you're out there doing a survey, you're not going to be able to take all the trees down. It would also be useless to take all of the trees down. Trees, again, provide oxygen, and we provide trees with carbon dioxide. You look at the bark, color, texture, furrows, age, and thorns. Twig clues. Leaf scars, aka buds, are the places where the leaves used to be attached. So this is when you have buds. Now, where do you see buds? What season do you normally see budding trees? In the springtime. And why does that occur? Well, generally in the fall, your leaves turn and they fall off. And then during the spring, you see the buds. That's the formation of new leaves. Again, leaf scars, aka buds, are the places where the leaves used to be attached. So basically, size, color, and shape of buds are also useful to identifying trees. Flower cues, shape, color, texture, and size. Fruits and seeds. Your sugar maple leaf. Again, your European olive tree. Your common oak leaf. Your common ash tree leaf. These look like pea pods right here. It's amazing what you can discover when you are just identifying trees. This is nature right here. Cones, different types of cones, pine cones. This is basically your ferns. They have small cones. These are generally your pine cones, all evergreen. Overall shape. So basically, leaf observations. Your deciduous leaf arrangement, basically alternate, opposite, whorl, leaf type, simple and compound, leaf edge, tire, lobe, tooth. Then you have your conifers, needles or scales, generally your evergreens, needle attachment, single or clusters. Now, let me show you some other leaves too, as this right here. This also comes from the different types of tree leaves right here. Remember I told you about compound leaves? You can find this. This is what we call a tree identification field book. And here, remember I told you about the compound leaves? This is what they look like. These are all your compound leaves. You have your white ash, your box elder, your buckeye, your black walnut, your honey locust, your black locust, your bitternut hickory, your shagbark hickory. Then you get into your lobed leaves. Now, basically, your sycamores and your oaks, they're your lobed leaves. Of course, your tulip, that's also lobed, and your sassafras trees. Then you get into your, basically your leaves that are heart-shaped or triangular, smooth, like your pawpaw, your sassafras, your brasswood. Now, your brasswood is generally a heart shape, and your cottonwood is generally I'm going to call it a triangular shape. It's got the point at the end. Looks more like a spade, but it's triangular. Then you look at your leaf edges. They're toothed, like your black cherry, your ironwood, your hop hornbeam, your slippery elm, your American beech. And then you get into the information on how your leaves are ID. But what I wanted to do was just give you a basis on what goes into dendrology. What is dendrology? Again, to know more about dendrology again, dendrology is basically the study of the characteristics of trees, shrubs, lianas, and other woody plants. Dendrology is considered to be a branch of systematic botany or forestry, and it is primarily concerned with the taxonomy of woody species. Historically, dendrology also encompassed the natural history of the woody species in a given area. But such studies are now more properly ascribed to the field of ecology. So modern dendrology is often focused on the identification of economically useful woody plants and their taxonomic relationships for industrial forestry endeavors through the discipline, and it is also useful for the conservation of rare or endangered species. Now, when I talk about industrial forestry endeavors, that means some of the trees are useful for making lumber, like your 2x4s, your 2x6s, and paper. This is why in certain states like Oregon and Maine, you have a lot of logging going on, even in areas of Washington. Now, of course, you have some people that don't want the trees cut down, but you need lumber, and trees make good lumber. but you have to understand forestry, and to identify trees, you have to also be one who's an arborist as well. So basically, in a nutshell, we'll talk about dendrology. We're basically studying a branch of, it's actually coming under biology, which it goes into ecology, and we're studying trees, shrubs, lianas, and woody plants. And when you're out there surveying, one thing that you are going to do, you're going to have to learn how to identify the trees. You have to get the name of the tree, and you're going to have to get the radius, especially if you're doing a topographical survey. And once again, when we deal with dendrology, dendrology basically studies the characteristics of trees, shrubs, and lianas and other woody plants. Dendrology is generally considered a branch of a portion of biology known as botany or forestry, and is primarily concerned with the taxonomy of woody species. Historically, dendrology also encompassed the natural history of the woody species in a given area, but such studies are now more properly ascribed to the field of ecology. So basically, modern dendrology is often focused on the identification of economically useful woody plants and their taxonomic relationships for industrial forestry endeavors through the discipline. It's also useful for the conservation of rare and endangered species. So what I brought you tonight was an overview on dendrology, and I showed you some leaves and some types of trees. And again, if you're interested in getting into the field of forestry and even ecology or botany, I would check with your nearest college, see how marketable these fields are, because, you know, in the end, you have to enjoy what you're doing. And I enjoy giving this lesson because I got to learn more about identifying trees as well. And I also, me too, have an assignment, which this assignment, I have to identify the leaves. I've already identified some, but basically, dendrology is for studying trees, shrubs, lianas, and other woody materials. And that concludes this topic on dendrology. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And if you're looking for some political and social content, check out my main channel, the 411 Talk Zone radio show. Now, here's where you can find me on YouTube for both channels. For the 411 Talk Zone radio show, you can find me right here on YouTube, X formerly Twitter, Rumble, and Truth Social. And for the QCIS channel, you can also find me here on YouTube, find me on X formerly Twitter, and of course, LinkedIn. And once again, thank you for listening and viewing this topic on dendrology from the QCIS channel. On this channel, you get a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and math. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. I want you all to have a wonderful and gracious evening.